Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn webinar. As always, I'm Chris Cardwell, Program Manager for Deep Roots KC, and I'm excited to be here with you today one more time for the final December edition of our 2023 Lunch and Learn series. What a remarkable year it has been, and it is a pleasure to have you with us through all these seasons. Now, before I begin our video broadcast and introduce our topic today, I want to make a few announcements, and I'll bring up my slideshow. Pardon me. Zoom is not cooperating. I have to tech adapt. Just one moment, please, folks. Oh my goodness. Lunch and Learn today. Manheim Gardens, a comprehensive approach to stormwater management. First of all, we are incredibly grateful to our sponsors today. The Missouri Department of Conservation, our perennial sponsor, and specifically for our stormwater education content, the Mid-America Regional Council. MDC graciously underwrites almost all of Deep Roots programs, and Mark, through their Water Quality Education Committee microgrants program, has helped us to shine a light on the major impacts that native plant landscapes, best management practices, and increased awareness of stormwater management can have on the overall quality of our watersheds. Now, stormwater must be regarded as an asset in the Kansas City region, and Deep Roots is proud to partner with Mid-America Regional Council to spread this message and highlight Paragon projects that demonstrate these outcomes. And a special thanks to our guests, the Manheim Garden Conservancy, who have collectively built a safe haven for nature and nourishment in the urban core at 42nd Street and Forest Avenue. And we're also so grateful to you, our viewers, for your participation and support of our programs and our webinars. Now, this webinar, as always, will be recorded, and all of the resources will be available online. You'll receive an email when it's up on the Deep Roots website with a link and any resources mentioned during the broadcast. So watch your email and our website. And if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll be notified every time we upload a video. And during the program, please don't forget, put your comments in the chat, your banter, tell me about what birds you're seeing, and put your questions in the Q&A. Specifically, if someone has raised their hand already during today's session and has a question, drop that into Q&A. If it's an option that I can answer while we're watching, I'll get right to it. Otherwise, save your questions for the end, as Robbie Bondi and Steve Sacken are going to join us to share in this project. So here in our Deep Roots community of collaborative partners and supporters and followers like you, we understand the multiple inherent benefits of native landscapes, right? And our featured partners today, Manheim Gardens, embraces native landscaping as a vital tool in a suite of approaches to overall greater sustainability of urban food systems. Now, a community garden that's employing soil health principles, crop rotation, and especially rainwater harvesting to support their production, is such a beacon of sustainability. And our sponsors today, Mid-America Regional Council, have actually underwritten some of the projects that we'll discuss on the grounds of Manheim Gardens. Again, nestled between 42nd and 43rd Streets on Forest Avenue in the heart of the community they serve. Manheim is a truly warm, welcoming, and very special place, and it was my honor to visit with today's guests earlier in the year to discuss their origins and their approaches. So let's check it out. And here we roll.
Hey, my name is Steve Sacken, and probably 11 years ago, we were looking for a place to garden. And Manheim Garden, which had been there since at least the mid to late 90s, had been shut down probably the previous years. And we prevailed upon the people that own it. It's called NHS, the National Neighborhood Housing Service, I believe. And we prevailed upon them to let us rehab the garden. It was overgrown. It was like going back into the wilderness. So we didn't get in here until July the first year. And I guess Augusta woman was kind of in charge of it. Kind of started this thing, I believe. The first time I met her, at the garden here, she looked at me and said, "You guys might be the ones to save this garden," because she was really committed to it, and they were planning on developing the land, apartments or something, within 5 years. So once we got in, we kind of immediately fell in love with it and realized it was a really unique resource. Basically, a whole green city block in Midtown. So our strategy was that if we could make this as integral and beloved by the community and the neighbors, that was maybe our best hope in saving the garden. And every year, a few more people joined up, and so it just got, each year it got a little bit better. And in 2016, NHS decided they needed to sell this property, and they were committed for this space to remain a green space. And anyway, so we worked out a deal, and they agreed to sell it to us for a wonderful price on the condition that we keep it a garden. So we got together with some kind of committed, devoted people, raised the money, and we bought it as a conservancy, which means that no human being owns this garden. It's owned by this legal construct called a conservancy. And the cool thing about it is it's set up to be a green space forever. And we're kind of the caretakers. Now we're trying to set up this organization so it can sustain itself, on into the future. So hopefully 500 years from now, there'll be somebody getting interviewed here about our water system. So anyway, that's the short. The way it's set as a conservancy, it's set up to be a green space in perpetuity. And that's not the same as saying it's got to be a garden in perpetuity, and it's not to say that you couldn't build a building or two here. And it's not to say that we couldn't sell the land. But it's just whoever bought it would still be constrained by the legal restraints of this having to be a green space. Whatever the definition would be accepted. And as it turns out, there's another legal protection to further kind of lock in this remaining green space that we've not done yet. It's kind of expensive. That's on our agenda to give it a better protection. If a developer came in and with friends in City Hall, who knows what could happen. With a better legal protection, then that would just make this more secure.
What would that entail? Does it go into the zoning of the property, or is it?
I'm just not the one to ask.
Cool. I'm just curious. It's
Yeah.
just piquing my interest.
Yeah, it's interesting to me, and I've always wanted to do it, but there was more knowledgeable people here.
My name's Robbie Bondi. I've been volunteering with Manheim Gardens for, I guess right around 3.5 years now. I actually started volunteering with Manheim to work on this whole water system. So it was right around when COVID first started. I was laid off. So I work as a mechanical engineer. I've done all sorts of projects. Worked over at Honeywell. I've worked in recycling startups, and I currently work in greenhouse technology. And I actually got my start in greenhouse technology because of my experiences working on this system. So again, I was laid off. I didn't really have anything going on, so I just started coming by and seeing if they needed any help. And I mentioned something about the solar panels, and I said something to Steve Sacken, and Steve asked me if I knew anything about them, and I said, yeah, enough to be dangerous. And always been fascinated with solar, never worked on it professionally, but I'd taken some online classes here and there. And so he mentioned to me that they got the system off of a grant, but it's never really worked quite right. So I spent that first summer of 2020, just troubleshooting the electrical part. So I figured out a couple of things, that they needed actually more solar panels, so I put 2 extra ones up there. And then I also figured out that the type of battery they were using wasn't really the right one for sitting in an unair-conditioned, unheated shed out, in all the extremes of the Midwest, summers and winters. So they were frying their batteries every summer, and then by winter, they were just toast. So, just through some research and kind of asking battery guys, what they would recommend, I got these golf cart batteries, which are actually resealable lead acid water batteries, or floating lead acid water batteries, whatever. So essentially, they're very low maintenance. Like I said before, you can, I didn't maintenance them for the first 3 years, and they've still been working fine. So in theory, I could actually keep maintaining these batteries once a year, maybe on like a weekend for 5 minutes for the next 20 years, and they'll work fine. So that was the whole point, was just kind of reconditioning that whole solar system so that it works. And now that we've got it into a good spot, it's been pretty slow maintenance. I don't really have to check on it anymore. This is the start of our water harvesting system. So as you can see, there's these 2 downspouts from the roof. So this is like a slightly graded flat roof. It's an old folks home that's right next door to our community garden. And we estimate that for every 1 inch of rain, we get roughly 5,000 gallons of collected water. So in the construction phase, what they did was they dug up some trenches, and they put these 4-inch PVC pipes. So they connected them together, and then it actually runs over here and then comes out through this retaining wall. And so that's the first step of the water collection. This comes out of the roof, and we'll put it into our nurse tank that initially collects it. Our whole system is off grid. It's powered by batteries that are charged up by these 400-watt solar panels. So it's in a little bit in shade right now, but for the most part, all year round, they get about anywhere from 8 to 10 hours of sunlight every day. Really simple way to collect energy. So this is our shed. So again, solar panels are right on top, and they come in to the side here, and we run them over to this charge controller. So the charge controller essentially is like a traffic manager between these batteries and the solar panels. So if there's a little bit too much, power coming in, it throttles it so it doesn't overload the batteries. It essentially just modulates that. Okay, so power comes in to the charge controller. The charge controller then connects to both the batteries and the inverter. It's a fancy term for it changes the DC power that these batteries and solar panels operate off of into the AC power that you use for plugging stuff in. So here you can see all of these are some outlets on the side of it. We actually have it run to a multi-cord outlet, and we've charged up power tools from there. So this power setup is what the water pump runs off of. So when that nurse tank we talked about has water filling up into it, that's what then kicks off the pump. The pump draws its energy effectively from the batteries through the inverter, and that's how it goes. Actually, these lights are run off of this system too. All right, so as you can see, we're at our nurse tank. Currently, it's a bit out of commission. We had some ground grading issues where water's actually been seeping in underneath the tank faster than it's flowing into the tank. And that's creating this buoyancy effect that's pushing it up and obviously out into a state of disrepair. So if this were to work, which we'll get it there in a couple of weeks or so. Again, downspouts evacuate water from the roof. It comes down in this common drain, goes through this retaining wall, and then this 4-inch pipe will feed our nurse tank. So this is I think this is a 3,000 gallon tank. It's our smallest one. At the bottom here, we have an effluent sump pump. So effectively, it's a heavy duty pump that can deal with leaves and dirt and all that sort of crud. And it has a mechanical float valve. So essentially what the pump does is it allows the tank to initially fill up with some water, maybe about 10% of the tank. And then what will happen is that float valve will start to lift. When it gets into this lifted position, then it allows an electrical circuit to be completed that then brings power from the inverter in our garden shed and provides it to the pump. So that float valve essentially acts as a light switch. But instead of your hand turning it on and off, it's the amount of water inside the tank that turns it on and off. It helps you just avoid running a pump dry, which will degrade the lifetime of an impeller within the pump very quickly. So it's a really easy way to have a non-powered item, the float switch, control a powered item without using any computers, without using any internet. It's very old school, it's very practical, very low maintenance. So you can see our beautifully decorated water storage tanks, usually decorated with chalk and vines. So each of these tanks is about 1,500 gallons apiece. So we've got total capacity of 6,000 gallons of water. Realistically, a good rain will fill this up in a day, easy. So what happens is that nurse tank, using the solar powered pump, it sends water to the first one on the opposite end, and it fills it at the very top. So that tank will fill all the way up, and then there's actually a connecting pipe be on this side that connects it to the next pipe, the next tank. That tank then fills up as it overflows from the first to the second, and then you rinse and repeat, fills this one up, and fills this one up. So what you see here is this is our overflow spout. So if we have too much water, it'll actually go out the top. I've put in a second float switch, which is a reverse of the first. So what happens is when this float switch goes all the way up, saying that this tank is full, it'll actually shut that same pump off. So it's helping us conserve energy, and again, very easy, efficient, low maintenance piece of equipment. So when we're ready to use the water, we address this distribution manifold right here. So we've got a garden hose hooked up to a hand valve. So we'd open up this hand valve to be able to send water through, and depending on which tank is full, we'd open up these big banjo valves. So essentially, there is no pump inside of these. We're operating off of hydrostatic pressure. That's the benefit of having these tanks out of ground, is that we can use gravity in our favor. So the rest of the garden is relatively downhill from where we are. And even towards the bottom of the tank, you'll still get some decent pressure coming out of the hose. When it's totally full, it'll be actually faster than the municipal water pressure. By the time you get to the lower end, it's a little less, but it'll still water all of your plants.
Sparsely grassy hillside, not much growing on it. Certainly nothing of any height. Certainly no flowers. And this, I think, is largely Jason's approach. One reason is because of the way we've incorporated the water to keep it on site. It kind of slowly moves underground. So all this stuff is well hydrated.
So the deep-rooted native plants are helping with the erosion, but then the stormwater catchment is helping the deep-rooted native plants.
Because like the pond leaks, but you know, after rain it'll fill up and it'll slowly leak out, and the water will just kind of drain down and seep in.
So in this landscape we're standing in front of, there's not been any irrigation? Supplemental?
No, not at all.
All natural.
Yeah.
And the diversity, we see 15, 20, 25 different native species.
The fact that it is as green and lush it is now is a testimony to how well we've improved the soil. There's probably close to 40 fruit trees in here too. And anyway, this is the swale, the last catchment of the water to help keep it here rather than let it go down the drain. So there's a spring in here year-round. And it used to just seep over the sidewalk. Moss would grow in there. It would be slippery and dangerous. We worked out a deal through the generosity of the Kansas City Water Garden Society, and they bought us all these giant rocks to landscape this. And the funny thing was, we just assumed that we get a bunch of rock and get a couple strong guys and be able to put them in place. But a lot of these rocks were a couple thousand pounds. So we had to rent a bobcat. And that was even not easy, just moving these rocks in place. But they are in place now, and the idea is to get the water from the spring to kind of flow over the rocks. And there's a little basin across right by the sidewalk, and it's usually filled with water. And you probably know what these are.
That's beautiful Lobelia cardinalis. Amazing cardinal flower, hummingbird attractant, and a water-loving rain garden plant. Along with pickerel weed.
This is pickerel weed?
Blue pickerel.
Oh, cool.
An emergent, which means its feet are always wet, or rarely dry out completely.
Yeah, and look at this. In Kansas City, along the sidewalk, where do you see cattails? But yeah, like I said, this is always full of water.
Is there much maintenance being dedicated to this specifically, or is it in the establishment period we're letting things shake out?
Yeah, by the nature of a project like this, as you well know, there's more to be done than there are people to do. So whoever gets inspired to take on a project, they do it. Like I said, Jason, a couple years ago, was inspired to put the natives in the hillside. A couple years ago, Jacob, Dan, and Jason got inspired to make this happen. And then there's another, here we are in Kansas City. We're, like a mile or less than a mile from the plaza. There's cattails growing, in a spring. On the other side of these green plants, there's a whole flock of chickens. So this is our lower garden, and we've worked really hard to improve the soil here as we did up there. I got these two grapevines to plant it's late spring, and when I went to plant them, one right there, I took my knife and I dug a hole, like that, and boom, there's the hole. Put the grapevine in and covered up, and that was that. And what was really interesting, and it was the same thing with this grapevine up here, which is doing even better. But I decided to plant grapevine on the other side of the fence on land that we had not touched. And
But higher compaction, lower organic material.
yeah.
About how many seasons have you been working this lower part?
I think this is the 4th year on this one.
Remarkable.
Yeah. But anyway, it took about 10 minutes to dig the hole for the grapevine here. And then shortly later, the vine died.
I'll ask the same question on this side down here. This is a long way from the hose. What kind of irrigation needs to be done here? Or has the soil improvements really helped with water holding?
Year, we had so much organic matter, so much compost. We had a prolific planting. We didn't water once. And just because, there was so much mulch and organic matter that it held the moisture. It was not necessary to water.
Well, what a wonderful flashback to summer that was. Steve and Robbie and I were visiting on site there, and everything was in full bloom. My colleagues and I are just discussing that we almost forgot what cicadas sounded like. So that a shorter video, but really gives us some great insight into the breadth of approaches. And I'd like to welcome Robbie and Steve to join us, please, as panelists and discuss further kind of what those approaches look like, and how a combination of soil health and rainwater harvesting and landscape approaches combine to make Manheim such a wonderful place and very special, as you can see. Robbie, I've got a question queued up already. Let me bring up my Q&A here. One of our viewers, Victor's asking about the filtration system for the rainwater harvesting. And you had alluded to that, kind of the pump itself. Are there any additional stops between the runoff and the outflow?
Victor, that's a really good question. Yeah, I didn't mention it in the video, but before the water enters that very first tank, we have like a basket mesh filter. So I couldn't tell you what kind of micron size that is or what mesh size that is, but it's just a standard mesh strainer. They generally come with tanks that size that fit in that. I think it's a 16-inch manhole. It's essentially just to screen off leaves, debris, bark, just stuff like that. As far as drinking water goes, we don't consider that collected water to be drinking water, since it's not filtered for that.
I gotcha. Now when it comes to this might be a question that's a little bit circular in science nature, but if you irrigate your food with harvested stormwater and it doesn't have a filtration system beyond the particles, how does that process into our food? Do we end up running the risk of, um, you know, contamination, or does the soil biology help to keep those out and only intake the clean water?
That's actually something a colleague of mine and I were talking about just this morning. Um, by doing stuff like a filter screen or a first flush, you kind of remove, the first layer of debris in a rainwater collection system. But yeah, there's definitely questions around, what's the plant taking in? Um, you know, the water. I'm not really sure. That's kind of above my pay grade in terms of biology and chemistry. But to me, I feel a little safer with it going through like a plant media, and I feel even safer if it goes through something like a tree media where there's even more fibers filtering out the water in between irrigation source and fruit body.
That makes sense. It's a pretty impressive, complex way that the plants work, but in your greenhouse operations, I'm sure that you're seeing high quality, nutrient dense food coming out of stormwater that doesn't have a quality assessment to it necessarily, or rainwater directly harvested. Um, Now we've got a question from Heather. Heather apparently is in the hobby of solar and she's having some issues. So, A, when you mentioned maintenancing your batteries, can you reiterate kind of how you optimize the batteries for the solar panel? Heathers are having issues in the summer when it gets too hot, like you were saying. It's in an unclimate controlled shed. When it's too cold, when it's too hot, maybe they're not holding the charge. What are some tips?
Well, Heather, it depends on what type of battery you have, but what I would highly recommend is a flooded lead acid battery. Those big ones with water in it. What happens is that um, as you charge up the battery or the ions move from the positive side to the negative side, you can boil off some of that water. And it's essentially just distilled water in battery acid. So you want to maintain what's called the specific gravity, or some people will call it the relative density. It's the same thing. Um, if you've ever brewed beer, they have what's it called? Um, called a hygrometer. Essentially, it's just like a glass tube with a scale written on it, and you would take like a vial of whatever fluid you're sampling, and you bob it in there, and based off of its buoyancy, the fluid's buoyancy, the hygrometer will stick up or sink down. And so there'll be a reading on the scale. There's a lot of clever tools for battery hygrometers, or battery density measurement tools, super cheap on Amazon, things like that. Um, and your flood lead acid battery will say, hey, it's supposed to be in this range. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think like 1.2, something like that. But it should say. And essentially, it's usually you just need to add more distilled water into your level. You fill it all the way up, fill the battery all the way up, and then put the cap back on. That's generally the problem, but it depends on what's specifically happening in your situation. Just kind of a general overview of usual problems.
That's cool insight. And obviously, you got a good head for technical approaches to a lot of different things. You got that engineering mind. But do you have the specific courses that you took online if someone were wanting to expand their knowledge themselves? Or is that something maybe we could include in the resources that we send out?
Yeah, actually, maybe I have the book with me.
Would you
It's
like to read it
probably
aloud for us?
not. I won't do that to you guys. No, I believe it's SEI. It was like the Solar Energy Institute, and they're out of Colorado, I think south of Denver. They've got a lot of good online courses that were really well put together and gave me a good idea. They even had some courses on the National Electric Code, which is, concerns like fire, safety protection for your circuits, electrical circuit sizing, things like that. Um, I thought that was really helpful for me to learn that stuff, so I don't feel as intimidated. And you can learn electrical safety, things like that. But yeah, SEI was a really helpful resource for me to know enough to be dangerous.
That's a good caveat. And, as a volunteer for the garden, I suppose they get their money's worth out of you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Excellent. Well, I was hoping Steve, if Steve can hear me, if you could kick your video and your microphone back on, I'd love to hear some more insight from you. And we got a couple technical questions, but let's go down to Holly's question. And Steve, you can speak to the community that this garden was founded in as one of the kind of first members. Describe how Manheim is open to the public and describe the hours, and then we'll get into maybe some engagement opportunities. Folks, anybody can be a part of this family that is doing these incredible collective exercises for climate and food systems and stormwater.
And family is a good word to describe it. Probably the best way is every Sunday, year round, starting around 10 o'clock, we have a work day. That's the best time for somebody to kind of introduce themselves and join up, see what's going on. And yeah, it's year round, every Sunday. And right now there's not a lot left to harvest. Got some, there's still arugula and beets or daikon radishes to harvest. But we've got, I think we have 4 or 5 truckloads of leaves that need to be spread. And that's kind of one of the main jobs at the moment. We've got the greenhouse that needs work and it actually needs to be planted. And so kind of in a nutshell, it's probably a good way, plus, there's all the online stuff, but to see, to be there and to see it up in reality is probably the best way.
And as far as access, in general, when folks are gardening there, can we just walk in and walk around, look around?
Yeah. It's
open. The chickens.
It's open every day.
Uh-huh.
Well, the chickens and the ducks and the geese are in the yard, but they're locked in. So you need somebody in there to get, if you want to get in and see them.
We can wave at them from across the fence. Yeah. Excellent. Well, yeah, definitely. What a remarkable group of volunteers that get a lot done, including that grant that you alluded to, and that was with Kansas City Community Gardens, and it was it paid for or brought in large part by KC Water. So water utility has a vested interest in managing stormwater on site, so much that they put money into.
I think it's like $100,000 a year they put up.
Remarkable. Do you recall what the original price tag was for that water system? And was it a community organization?
It was around $10,000. And I think the way the grant worked was that they kicked in 9,000 and we had to kick in 1,000, something like roughly that.
And was that a cash match or was that a volunteer time match?
No, it was cash. I mean, we had to put a lot of volunteer time into this, but we had to come up with, it was about roughly 10% of the cost of the project we had to come up with ourselves.
Still a remarkable reimbursement. And that just really speaks to the significance of stormwater management on site, especially in communal, residential, and commercial spaces. Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as Mid-America Regional Council's micro grants for 24 are also open for proposals now. For nonprofits and community organizations. We did that live with Heather. And let's go back to Victor. We've got him on the hook again with that rainwater system. How do you winterize that system? What do you do? Do you have to do a blowout? Do you clean the tanks? Speak
You
to
have
that.
to disconnect it. You have to drain all the tanks. One year we didn't in time, and it froze and the pipes all broke, so we had to replace them all. Oh, what a pain in the neck that was. But yeah, so in the fall, after pretty much after the growing season is over, you'll drain the tanks completely into the pond, and then also there's a valve on the pipes leading into the tank that you have to release that well to drain the pipes leading into the tanks, and that's pretty much it. But you have to get all the water out.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Just got to drain all the pipes out. And then there's that first tank. That's you guys in the video. It was above ground, kind of in disarray. Generally speaking, when that's working properly, it's insulated by the ground, so it's around usually like 55 degrees Fahrenheit. So it keeps it from freezing, but it's got an overflow to allow water to come out the top if need be.
Excellent. Let's see here. I mean, it's just such a complex system to just anybody who doesn't know too much about it, right? Can you speak to some other opportunities for rainwater harvesting that some of our audience members might be able to take on that maybe is a little more, I guess, basic? Something as simple as rain barrels and connecting from a roof line?
Yeah, you can always take a rain barrel and put it, like, I would lift it up, on a support platform, maybe 4 or 5 feet off the ground. Put your gutter downspout into there, in between the end of the downspout and the opening of the rain barrel. Put a mesh screen. It can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. And that should just be able to catch leaves and debris and dust, at least like the larger size particles. And then at the bottom of that rain barrel, you just have like a regular hose bib or a spigot, and then you can run a hose off of that. And essentially it's the same thing. It's just a much smaller version of it.
And we'll put a little bit of a plug out there for our residents on the Kansas side. Both Wyandotte and Johnson County residents are able to access cost share reimbursement funding for rainwater harvesting systems through their local municipalities. The county in Johnson County distributes money to the communities who then oversee the projects. So you submit a proposal, you get approval from the authority, you do the project, you send them the receipts. And in Wyandotte County, I can speak to as a resident 50% reimbursement for rain barrel systems. And when you talk about a 50-gallon barrel of water, and you guys are talking about 6,000 barrels of water, they fill up remarkably fast. Did you say that like a rain will fill up 6,000 gallons of water for you?
Just about. I think our ballpark was somewhere around 5,000 gallons per inch.
And then you can think that's 5,000 gallons that aren't going down the drain, that aren't having to be treated at the water treatment facility, right?
Yeah, and plus, the overflow goes into the pond, which holds another 3,000 or 4,000 gallons, and then the overflow of the pond is caught at the lower part of the garden where we got the swale built in, which holds another couple thousand gallons. So
where that food forest is, yeah,
into the food forest, yeah. So anyway, we capture almost all of it, and this is just a small model, but it just demonstrates what can be done.
It's impressive when you think about it that way. And I don't know if from state to state it varies. Of course, we happen to be, although this year we were the droughtiest part of the continent. In general, over the long run, Kansas City region is a very water rich community.
Yeah.
But I know, Robbie, you work in the Caribbean and all across the continent in systems like this. Can you speak to the legality or illegality of rainwater harvesting and maybe shed some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for the most part, rainwater harvesting is legal. I think there's some misconception around rainwater harvesting, that really has to do with like large scale, like shallow, not like just open air harvesting, where you take like, a lower, I'm not sure how to say it, but take like a plot of land that's in a lower elevation and essentially just dam it off and then allow rain to come in and fill up. That depends on your county, because that's much bigger system than what we're talking about. But yeah, from my company does a lot of rainwater collection systems for commercial greenhouse growers in the Caribbean on a bunch of different islands. I think we're in like 7 or 8 islands at this point. And water catchment over there is actually a really common practice. Just it's not necessarily the scarcity of water, since they're right next to the ocean. They get a lot of rain. It's more of the security of the municipality still having power and being able to provide clean, potable water. So it's very common for even just a residential place to have, some 5,000 gallons of water just stored in a tank that they collect off of their roof. Now, I'm sure they have to filter it and clean it after that to some degree, just for, hygienic sanitation standpoint. But no, I mean, it's almost like it's actually easier than solar energy. It's the startup costs to get going on it's way lower. And it's just like free money. It's just resources just raining down from the sky, literally.
Literally falling from the sky. Spectacular. Well, lastly, I really want to give the two of you an opportunity to please share with us more ways for folks to become engaged with Manheim. I know we've got a great social media presence and website, but if you would just maybe take us through that with some highlights on how to get engaged and support the already incredible work that's being done there.
Well, I'll pull up our website. Steve, do you want to speak to some ways to get involved in Manheim Gardens?
Well, again, coming on Sundays where you're actually there and see what needs to be done and meet the people involved in the project seems to me to be the best way. And plus, there's always stuff to harvest. You can take some arugula home or some spinach or radishes or maybe some eggs. So it's hard for me to imagine a better way than actually just being there and seeing it. And, a little farm right in the middle of Kansas City. It's kind of astonishing.
Yeah, I don't think we never have. I'm sorry. I think we always have an abundance of food to hand out to people,
right?
Whatever they want to take. So there's
and the problem is that they don't take enough.
Exactly. Let me see. There's volunteer. We actually do have garden plots. We do just like a small annual fee to help pay the utility bill for the water. We usually sell eggs. We've got, I think, Steve, is it like 8 or 9 beehives that we harvest honey from every year?
It's something like that. Yeah, I think there may have been one that died this year, so it's 8 or 9.
Yeah, we have events that we log on our calendar. We've got a Facebook page, Instagram. I think the website's the easiest place to get a hold of anybody. If you guys are interested in interacting with us at any capacity, and just you can see our address, stop on by. It's an open community space between dusk and dawn. Everyone's welcome. An inclusive space, an inclusive green space in the heart of Kansas City.
And it's a really good place to come and learn about nature, about how to garden, how to improve soil, how to prepare food. So just it's an, besides just the wonderful people involved, there's really a lot to learn there. There's a lot of really wise and learned people there who have a lot of knowledge to impart.
Case in point, yourselves included. So super grateful. As you see at the top there, manheimgardens.org, with so much to experience and so much to contribute. I'm going to switch you out here, Robbie.
No problem.
And we'll, of course, include our presenters and guests' contact information, ways to get a hold through the website there, and the general Manheim email. But it has just been a great pleasure to have you guys here today. I'm going to go ahead and get into wrap up here.
Chris, if I can, anybody on the webinar, if you guys have questions, technical questions for me or Steve, feel free to get a hold of me through whatever contact you give. I'm happy to help out with y'all's projects, and it's always a journey. So if you can get just some information from someone else, just makes it a little bit easier. So happy to help.
Thank you guys so much. Again, Robbie Bondi, Steve Sacken. This has been Manheim Gardens' comprehensive approach to stormwater management. And that's from the soil to the sky, everything in between. And I can personally speak from experience, some of the best eggs you'll ever put in your belly. Do join us again. The upcoming webinar, December 21st, will welcome Sydney Ross back as we seek out the beauty in the landscape in the winter. We shared with you some seed activities that can be enjoyed throughout the winter season. But join Sydney as she takes you and demonstrates how to look and see the beauty in the landscape. And do join us. Register now for planetnative.org. Early bird pricing ended just a couple weeks ago, but still, what a great opportunity to join us in February in person with some of the greatest minds in the landscape industry, featuring Will Metcalf from SWT. Will has a lot of experience in stormwater management landscapes, and he's going to talk about evaluating landscape performance. So not only is the work that we do enriching the natural world and enriching the beauty of our built environment, but it is high performing. And he's going to speak to some really insightful ways that we can assess that, just like our rainwater harvesting system at Manheim, thousands and thousands of gallons of water. We'd again like to thank our sponsors, Mid-America Regional Council, for bringing you stormwater management, water quality education programming. And again, the grant that supported this programming this year is now open for proposals from nonprofits, community organizations, schools, etc. If you have an idea for a project, for an event, for an outreach activity, or even for a landscape or stormwater management installation, please, we'll include the links to find that. And you can go to Mid-America Regional Council's website for more information on that. And this is my favorite guy, this little droppy guy. And he tells us if it's on the ground, it's in our water. And poof, if that doesn't get you thinking about your built landscapes. Over the winter, please join us as Nature Advisors is open for volunteers and applicants. And the program is exciting. We've wrapped up our first season serving 40 homes with hands-on, in-person native landscaping and ecosystem support consultation. Resources, links to designs, and all kinds of insight, dedicated volunteers coming to their neighbors and their friends, providing incredible support for naturescaping and ecosystem support. Brought to you by Evergy, MDC, and the Miller Hammond Charitable Fund, where I'm honored to be leading that program into 2024. Do check us out on social media as we conclude this year's programming, and visit us at deeproots.org. While you're there, please take full advantage of our archived webinars and consider making a donation. Without your personal support, we couldn't make this happen. And we encourage you to continue to join us, and we'll see you right back here at the next webinar on 12/21 of 2023.